Hi there and welcome to Ratioti Mum. I thought today I'd talk about listening. It's been something that my husband and I have been talking about a lot, and actually my friends and I have been talking about a lot because although we know our children can hear us, they seem to never be listening. And then I was doing the positive parenting conference with a fine parent over the past week, and there was a speaker by the name of Betsy Brown Braun, and she had some really great advice around communication with your child and how communication with your child is key. And she spoke a lot about that same thing, like you have to tell your child 15 times to do it. You say it, you know they've heard it, so why aren't they listening? So she has put aside a list of things, 7 things she gives you, 7 bits of advice or a process that you can follow to really help your children to listen. And I really liked it, and I've been trying to do it over the past few days, and I must say I've definitely seen an improvement in the amount my children are listening, and it makes a lot of sense. So I thought I would share that with you today. So she says the first thing is that there's actually an optimal distance to be away from someone, and that is between 18 inches and 4 feet. So when you're giving your child an instruction or you asking your child something, you should ideally be between 18 inches and 4 feet away from them. Now, I know I'm definitely guilty of not doing this. How often do I shout something to the bedroom? Boys, make sure you clean up in there if you're taking those out, or out into the garden. Guys, only 5 more minutes and then we're going. So she said, really try and make sure that you're within that optimal distance. And that goes for anyone. That's not just children. For anyone, there's that optimal distance. The second point that she makes is make sure that there's nothing in between you and your child. Again, something I am very guilty of doing. I mean, there can be all sorts of things between me and my child. When I shout over out into the garden or over the garden furniture, or even when I give them instruction and they're sitting at the table and I'm standing in the kitchen, So she says, really make sure that there's an open passage between yourself and your child. The third thing that she speaks about is facing your child. So don't say something when your child has his back to you. Make sure that you're facing your child, and also don't say something when you've got your back to your child. So even if your child is looking at you and you're busy with something, so how often does it happen that we're busy chopping for making food and we give an instruction without actually facing our child? So make sure it's the optimal distance, there's nothing between you and your child, and that you are facing your child. Then she speaks about another thing, and she said, although you face your child, what a lot of parents do is they go, look at me, come in my eyes, because they want to know that they're connecting with their child. And she says, and I can speak to from therapy, occupational therapy, is she says, don't demand eye contact. Some children can make eye contact when they're listening, and some children can't. And what you're doing when you're demanding eye contact is very often you're taking away the emphasis from what it is that you are saying or instructing or asking, and putting the emphasis on the eye contact. So depending on the child's sensory profile, depending on how much processing the child can manage, they will possibly then be drawn into focusing on the eye contact and managing that eye contact, as opposed to actually listening to what you're saying. So she said, face the child. If they look at you, that's great. If they don't, that's also okay. So looking down, it's not necessarily that they're being disrespectful or that they're not engaging. And she also says, she reminds us that there's a lot that goes on in our peripheral vision. So, glancing away from my mum because it might be too intense to look her in the eye, I can still be very aware of her facial expressions and what's going on there. So she says, optimal distance, nothing between you and your child. Face your child, but don't demand that eye contact. Okay, then number 5 is drop to your child's level. And we all know what it's like to talk up to someone. And it's quite crazy that very often that's how our whole schooling career is. We're seated with our teacher standing in front of us. But she said, really, if you really want your child to listen to what you're saying, drop down to their level. So physically get down. If they're on the floor, get down onto the floor. If they're standing and you're standing, remember you're that much taller. So drop down to their level and face them there. It just changes that sort of power dynamic that you've got. Then she speaks about making it multimodal. So obviously it's auditory, they're hearing and they're listening. So there's the sound aspect to it. Sometimes there's the visual aspect, if they can connect with you for eye contact, but they are connecting in some way. If you are facing them, they can to some extent see you. So that makes it multimodal. But then she said as well, and this you have to judge from the child, because some children, and I know this as well from therapy, some children respond well to touch cues and some it's disarming for them. So you know your children, and you know whether they are cuddly children who like touch, who respond well to touch. But she said, if they do, just put a gentle hand on their shoulder. Just reach out and take their hand when you talk to them. Just make it multimodal so that it's not overwhelming them, but that they are able to connect with you through the different senses. Because maybe auditory processing is not their strongest way of processing. And we definitely, I definitely can speak to this for therapy. Depending on the child you've got, you've really got to communicate with them using the different sensory systems. And sometimes the visual input is far more important than what they are hearing. Sometimes giving them that physical cue where you touch them and using that touch pathway and that touch sense just with a firm touch, gentle but firm, can really get engagement much better. And then the last thing she said is just check in with them to see that they've got what you've said. So often we give an instruction and they don't respond, they don't listen, but we feel we've given the instruction, we give the instruction again, and by the fourth time we're giving the instruction, we're now really irritated. So she said it's a good idea, once you've done all these 6 things before, is that you really just check in with them and you say, love, have you got that? Did you get that? Did you understand what mom said? And just wait for some sort of acknowledgement. And she said it just sort of completes that circle with the communication. So I've been trying this at home and it really has been great. It does feel like a little bit more effort, because it is more effort up front when you've got to line these things up and do them. So it's not as easy to just shout an instruction while you're busy doing something else. But I will say that my success rate with having the children listen is far higher. So it definitely is less effort in the long run. So I'll repeat those for you quickly, just in case you didn't get them. So I can't remember them all. So it's the first one is be between 18 inches and 4 feet away from your child. So come into their proximity. The second is make sure that there is nothing between you and your child. So don't sit behind a desk and talk to them, or don't talk to them across a table or over some furniture. Really make sure there's an open pathway between you. Face your child. So no instructions to the back of the child's head and no instructions over your shoulder. Face your child. Do not demand that eye contact. If they give it, that's great. If they don't demand it. Drop down to your child's level so that you are on the same level as them. So if they're sitting on the floor, you drop down. If they're standing, you drop down so you're on your knees so that you're at their level. Create a multimodal form of communication. So maybe a soft firm but gentle touch on their shoulder. Take their hand. Maybe if you're giving a list of instructions, use your fingers to also show what you're doing. First you do this, then this, then this. It just adds a visual component to it as well. So make it multimodal. And then the last one, complete that circle of communication by checking in that they've got what you've said. So I'm going to keep trying it. I hope you can find that useful and try that too. Let me know how it goes. So yes, thanks again to Betsy Brown-Braun, who shared these on the Positive Parenting Conference with a Fine Parent. I found your talk really valuable if you do see this. All right, have a wonderful week all.